Hi, and welcome to our 21st in a continuing series on the book of Shmuel, or Samuel, and the founding of a Jewish monarchy. Episode 21, Shaul's descent into the maelstrom. In this year, we offer an explanation for why Shaul doesn't recognize David when the two of them had met in the previous chapter. We also attempt to understand the repetitious nature of the chapter by positing a novel literary technique that forces the reader to experience events as though they were the character themselves. The movie reference was to Momento. Thanks to Susan Ackerman's insight that in Tanach love is never explicitly reciprocated, we avoid a reading that sees David as a cold and calculating character. Lastly, we're perplexed by Shaul's request and David's acceptance of a bride price that involves mutilating the enemy, and we find shades of the Lavan story that will continue into the next chapter. All this and more. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy this podcast and will consider sharing it with others.
Okay, we're going to do a quick recap of a couple, outstanding issues from last week, chapter 17, before we try to conquer chapter 18. So one of the more pressing questions we were left with is essentially, why doesn't Shaul know David, right? They met in chapter 16, and yet in chapter 17 it seems like they're meeting all over again. So we offered sort of what I called the two easy outs. The academic approach, which is there's multiple authors who apparently don't read each other.
That doesn't make any sense.
Right. Option number two, it was, well, Shaul's just crazy, right? So he doesn't remember because there's some brain fog going on. Rabbi Menachem Liebtag, who I didn't see inside in his article in Megadim, I got it from Rabbi Torchiner, whose insights we've had a number of occasions to cite. He makes a frum version of the academic argument, which basically says even the Gemara admits or agrees that there are multiple authors. There's Gad Hanavi, there's Natan Hanavi, besides Shmuel. So the multiple authors thing doesn't necessarily have to be so crazy, especially if you consider that maybe chapters 16 and 17 are chronologically reversed. Meaning if chapter 17 comes before chapter 16, then David met Shaul as a soldier, and then later on, when Shaul needed a musician, so he called upon him. The problem with that, which Rabbi Torchiner points out, and Rabbi Liebtag's response, I think, wasn't sufficient, is there is a pasuk in chapter 17 that basically already says David goes back and forth from being Shaul's musician to being a shepherd. So that one I think we'll kind of have to scratch. The approach
also, it's, in the previous chapter with the barding aspect.
Yeah.
It's a Shaul loved David Amelech, right? Like they have a relationship, a warm relationship, and clearly King Shaul loves David from this Goliath situation also.
Well, we're going to see how
which came first, the
right.
chicken or the egg.
Right, I hear that. So an approach I would like to offer that I haven't seen, so you feel free to take it with a grain of salt. There's no indication between chapter 16 and chapter 17 of how long David stayed with Shaul as his musician. He could have been the flavor of the month, right? He could have come, played his guitar, and then been sent back home once Shaul no longer felt the melancholy. One thing we know for sure is that David has been away from Shaul for at least 40 days. The reason we know that is because the pasuk tells us that Goliath came out for 40 days taunting the Jewish people. When David shows up, he's never heard of that before, right? Mm-hmm. David shows up and goes, what is going on? What is this guy saying? If David had been there during the 40 days, he would know exactly what is going on. So in a certain sense, you can sort of just say maybe Shaul doesn't remember him. But I would go maybe one step a little bit further than that. The really challenging part of the question is when Shaul doesn't recognize him the second time around. So Shaul meets David, tries to put on the armor doesn't fit, and David goes out and fights Goliath without the armor. And when David goes out, the end of the parak, Shaul turns to Avner, who we've sort of surreptitiously just stuck in as the head of the army, and he goes, whose kid is that, right? Well, you saw him like 20 psukim ago. So to that, I would answer that I'm going to sort of try to read something into the text that's not 100% there, but I'll explain why. David wasn't supposed to go, meaning David shows up, says, I'm going. Shaul says, no problem, put on this armor and go. when David can't walk with the armor on and has to take it off, at least in Shaul's mind, that's the end of the opportunity for you to go fight on my behalf. Meaning, if you can't even walk in my armor, I have no confidence in you going to fight Goliath. The fact that David goes is not with the blessing or even the awareness of Shaul. David goes in spite of Shaul, and that's why when Shaul asks, "Who is that? What is going on? Whose kid is that?" It's almost, as much as it's a question of information, it's also a question of disbelief. We have this sort of with Rus and Naomi. When Rus comes back from being with Boaz, Naomi says, "Mi ata biti," right? Who are you? She's not asking her for information. She's asking, like, what's going on, right? Fill me in on what I'm.
Like if your kid does something out of character. Who are you and what did you do with my kid?
Right, so, something like that.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, his question is more like a statement of disbelief than genuine confusion. Okay, why am I arguing this if the text doesn't say it? The answer to that is because if we adopt this reading, then David HaMelech has a character arc that is patterned exactly after Yonatan.
Right.
Yonatan, when the Plishtim were attacking last time, so Shaul was with Yonatan and the 600 soldiers, and then Yonatan went off surreptitiously without his father's knowledge and attacked the Plishtim. Yonatan said, "Hashem will give them into my hands." Everything that Yonatan did, including going off without the knowledge of his father, is exactly what David did if we read this as David going without his father's awareness. Because then you have the surreptitious going to fight the Plishtim, the acknowledgement that this is all in God's hands, etc., and then Shaul not knowing and asking, where is Yonatan versus who is this? Is this David? Okay, that is to address question number one. Question number two that we had is what's with all the repetition, right? We mentioned things in chapter 17 that we've mentioned multiple times before. We even mentioned things within the chapter that we had mentioned a few psukim earlier in the very same chapter. It's disorienting. It gives you this feeling of what is going on. I know that information. I just heard it 2 seconds ago. Why are you telling it to me again? So one of the things I think that doesn't get enough attention is understanding the way the text makes the reader feel. I haven't seen anybody really talk about this. If you've ever read or seen the Never-Ending Story, it really captures this idea of bringing the reader into the text.
But didn't finish it.
Ba-dum-bum. I have the book here if you'd like, of literally bringing the reader into the text. And I try to do that, if you go back and listen to the recording, in the way that I read David's character, as very childish in how he's presenting. Now, I think what's going on a little bit is that the text is sort of giving you the experience of being Shaul, right? The brain fog, the not understanding the information that's being presented to you, like, wait, don't I know that? I think I know that. I've heard that before, right? That sensation is what you get as a reader and helps bring you into the understanding of what it must be like to be in Shaul's shoes.
The sort of mind screw narrative device.
Yeah.
Like, not quite like Sixth Sense or one of these things setting up like a major plot twist, but like, can I trust what I'm seeing or what I'm hearing?
Right.
There's an anime genre called Dementia that's supposed to be like that. There's a whole genre of like, like weird things happen to make you doubt like what is actually going on.
Right. There's a great movie, and I'm blanking on the name now, with Carrie Ann Moss and this guy who has amnesia.
Oh.
What's that? Is it Momento?
Oh yeah, probably.
Where the guy, there's like a private detective who has amnesia, and the story is told out of order, and he has to like write down like tattoos because every morning he wakes up and he has no recollection of anything.
50 First Dates?
No.
With Adam Sandler?
But you, as the viewer, as the audience, in participating, you also feel disjointed and are not sure what you can trust and what you can't trust in that kind of experience. And I think maybe we're getting some of that in chapter 17. Okay, one other piece of information to preface before we jump into chapter 18, and that is a very famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that is germane to our chapter, and that is Avos chapter 5, Mishnah 16, which says as follows: Kol ahava shehi tluya b'davar. All love that depends on something. Batel davar, b'tela ahava. If the thing ceases, then the love ceases. V'she'ena tluya b'davar, something that is not dependent on anything. Enu b'tel li'olam, the love will never cease. Ezuhi ava tluya b'davar. So what is an example of love that is dependent on something? That's zu avas Amnon v'Tamar, and we'll get into that story, please God, later on in Sefer Shmuel. But what is a love that's she'ena tluya b'davar? Zu avas David v'Yonatan. That is the love of David and Yonatan, and that is what we're going to pick up with at the beginning of chapter 18 right now. And we'll have to see if it's if we believe that it is in fact true that there is no thing that the love of David and Yonatan are dependent on. Okay, I know we read the beginning of chapter 18, but we're gonna read it again, even though I sort of believe that chapter 18, or maybe we'll call it 17 and a half, starts at the end of chapter 17 and goes through the first 5 psukim, but just for completion's sake, we'll start at the beginning of chapter 18. Is everyone, we good? Okay. Vayihi kikaloso l'daber el Shaul. It was when David finished speaking to Shaul. So, as you mentioned before, so far, who loves David?
Right. No, Shaul does.
Shaul is the only one that we know so far, before chapter 18, who loves David. So as soon as David finishes speaking to Shaul, remember he was telling him who he was, that he's Ben Yishai, and Shaul is talking to David about what he's accomplished. The nefesh Yonatan nikshara b'nefesh David, and the soul of Yonatan is bound up with the soul of David. Yeah,
which is a wild word to use.
Yeah, really. V'yahavehu Yehonatan kinafsho, and Yehonatan loves David as he loves his own self. Why would that be?
They have a lot in common.
Okay, so David, according to our reading that we offered in chapter 17, David is essentially Yonatan. Right. He's done all the same things that Yonatan did. Right, something like that. The question, I guess, is, well, why didn't Yonatan go do this? Why didn't Yonatan fight Goliath? Why is Yonatan absent from all of chapter 17? I think the answer is he got beat down 3 chapters ago, right? When the end result of Yonatan going off without Shaul's permission and doing all the things that he did was not right. It was not, you are the national hero and I'm so proud of you, my son. It was, let's kill my kid, right? So Yonatan sees in David someone who is not only a kindred spirit, but who is able to accomplish the things that he wishes he could continue to accomplish but can't, right, for fear of his own life. V'yikachehu Shaul bayom hahu v'lo natno lashuv beit aviv. And Shaul took him on that day and would not let him return to his father's house. So that's also part of what Shaul asked him, whose son are you? The answer that Shaul was, I think, looking for is, I'm your son. Right. Why am I your son? Because what did Shaul promise whoever killed Goliath? Right. What was the promise? The daughter of the king. Right. Right? So that's it. You're going to be my son-in-law. Vichrot Yonatan v'David brit ba'avato oso kinafsho. And Yonatan and David make a pact because Yonatan loved him as himself. Now, there are a number of people who will try to read into this and many other mentions in our chapter of the fact that we are always told someone loves David, but we're never told that David loves somebody, right? There doesn't seem to be any reciprocity of David loving them back. Everything here is Yonatan loves David. Yonatan does this. Shaul loves David. Later on, we're going to see Shaul's daughter loves David. Right. What about David? So first of all, just the name David is the beloved. We have that right. But there is, I think her name is Susan Ackerman. There's an article by an academic who points out that in fact, never in all of Tanach does the second party ever love back, right? So Yitzchak loves Esav Kitzai B'fiv. We don't get Esav loving Yitzchak. Rivka loves Yaakov. All the examples we have in Tanakh of person A loves person B, we never then get, and person B also loves person A. That doesn't exist in Tanakh. So it's not unexpected that David doesn't respond with loving the person back. It doesn't mean that David doesn't love them. It just means that in general in Tanakh, the approach is, and it's always, by the way, the more powerful person. The father loves the son, not the son loving the father. Whoever is in, Shaul loves David because Shaul, we're told that because Shaul is in a place of power. Over here, Yonatan is also in a place of power over David. temporarily, because we get the pasuk 4. V'itpashet Yehonatan et ha'me'il asher alav v'yitnei leDavid umadav v'al charbo v'an kashto v'an chagaro. Yonatan takes off his cloak, tunic, belt, sword, and bow, and gives them all over to David. What is he doing here?
Giving Malchus.
What do you think?
I don't know. First of all, I always thought this part was weird because it's like, I mean, he's giving him gifts, but it's like, dude, he already rejected the father's gifts. Like, if he's going into battle, like, maybe he doesn't want that stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. But what David's saying is that these are not. He's not giving them to you to use as a warrior. He's giving them because he's abdicating. He's the heir apparent.
He's the heir apparent, and he's giving it to
It's
him.
an interesting theory. I think that's a fair reading.
Right, like when before Aaron died,
He
so
takes his clothes.
Takes the clothes off and puts them on
Right.
his son.
Right.
Vayetze David b'chol asher yishalchenu Shaul yaskil. So David goes out with the troops, and he's successful wherever in any mission that Shaul sends him. Veisimeu Shaul al anshe milchama, and Shaul puts him in charge of the army. I don't know if this is in charge of all of the army. I think Avner is still top dog, but he's in charge of, let's say, a regiment. Vayitav beinei kol ha'am v'gam beinei avdei Shaul, and this makes everybody happy. The troops, the over here, I would say Avdei.
You know who doesn't say it makes happy? David's brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. We're not going to get to them for quite some time. David's brothers. Does it make? I mean, I guess it makes Shaul happy because David's like his commando. He's successful.
Which is why he's appointing him.
Okay, fair. B'shuv David mahakoses haplishti, and it was when David comes back from beating up on some more plishtim. V'teitzena hanashim mikol arei Yisrael, and the
Here's
women
where
come
the
out
trouble starts.
from all the cities. Lashir v'amecholot, to sing and dance. Likra Shaul hamelach batufim basimcha ubashar lishim. They come out to greet Shaul. So I assume Shaul is still going out with the army, right? He hasn't retired. He's not sitting around in the castle. He's also going out with the army, but David is sort of the head of the show over here. And the women come out with all their musical accoutrements.
Right.
And Vayitna Nashim HaMisachakos V'tomarna, and the women chanted as they danced, and they say the following.
Misachako, could that be read as mocking?
No, they're dancing.
Like mitzachek, you know.
Not mitzachek with a sin.
Oh.
V'tomarna Hikash Shaul ba'alfav. Shaul has killed thousands. V'David b'rivosav, and David with 10,000s. I actually saw one person who read this as Shaul went out to battle with 1,000 soldiers, and David went out with 10,000 soldiers. The reason that reading is slightly interesting to me, although I think it's wrong, is because then when Shaul complains in the next pasuk, I think it makes a little bit more sense. Vayichar l'Shaul ma'od v'yira be'einav hadavar hazeh vayomar natnu l'David rivavos v'li natnu l'ha'alpayim. They said that David killed 10,000s and I only killed thousands, or David was in charge of a bigger amount of the army, 10,000, and I'm only in charge of 1,000. V'od lo achamlucha. Basically, you've given him everything. The only thing that's missing right now is to make him king. Vayi Shaul oyein et David mahayom hahu v'halam. And Shaul, this is a really interesting word, oyein. He keeps a jealous eye on David from here on out.
What I want to know is, like, how could these women be so dumb as to not praise the king more than anyone else? Like, I assume that there's kings at this time. Okay, if you go to like a barbarian, like a Hittite or a Jebusite king, and you'd be like, King Jebus, you know, is great, but his general is so much better. He'd be like off with your head.
Yeah.
It's more of a tribal leader.
Yeah, it could be. That's fine. But it doesn't matter. I mean, if you go to Genghis Khan and you say Subutai is way greater than Genghis Khan, that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
And Subutai might not get out with his head either.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's it's like a kamikaze move. Like, why would the women say that? This is one thing that bothers me greatly.
That's a fair question. I hadn't thought of that question.
Why would they ever say something so blatantly stupid and discord fomenting?
It's fair. It's a fair question. I don't have a good answer for you. Vayimi macharat, and immediately the next day, vatitzlach ruach Elohim ra'a el Shaul, and an evil spirit of God descended upon Shaul. Vayitnabe b'toch habayit. And what do you have for yitnabe?
Began to rave.
Okay.
Yeah, raved incoherently.
I mean,
It sounds like he's has prophecy.
right. We have other words for raving mad. Vayitnabe is used intentionally to refer you to prophecy. Now, Shaul has had prophecy before, and it made him a little bonkers even then. We're going to see he has other experiences that are prophetic that also leave him sort of out of sorts. But what's going on here is very clearly, we're using that term right after telling us that there's a Ruach Elohim Ra'ah that came on Shaul.
Which
So
is wild. Like, are they?
You
Is the
have to
root
be
right?
in peace in order to have
Right.
to have,
Is it that the
nevuah.
right? But if
You
this
would
is
think.
nevuah, right? But if this is truly nevuah, could it be like you've been rejected? That guy who's playing the harp over there, he's your replacement. So enjoy your time while you can. Like, and he's like, no, this can't be. Like, I can't deal with it. That could be true nevuah.
right, I mean, there's
I like
something
that.
there's something maddening that is going on, and it's intentional.
Right.
It's intentionally happening by God.
Right.
Right.
He's got no problem with you, but he's totally gonna take over your situation, bro.
Yeah. Vayinabe b'toch habayit, and he prophesies, he raves, I guess we'll translate it, in the house. V'David menagem biyado, and David is carrying around his guitar, kayom bayom, like he did every day. V'chanit b'yad Shaul, and Shaul has got a spear in his hand. That's not a good combination.
And right, like if it,
Yeah.
don't you realize if you're the band and like the dude grabs a spear, like it's okay, concert's over.
Right. Yeah, you would think sort of his officers or whatever would realize, like, maybe let's not give him a spear unless
Maybe
he's
took
around
off
the
the
police
wall,
station.
right?
Yeah. Um, Also, it's interesting to point out that David is playing the music, which is usually what removes the evil spirit from Shaul. But God has seemingly here gone out of his way to not allow David's music playing to do what it normally does to set up exactly this situation. V'yatel Shaul et hachanit. So Shaul, it sounds like he tosses the spear. I think it's more of like a stabbing motion because he does it twice. Vayomer akeb David, and he says, obviously not out loud. We're going to assume this is an internal monologue. Vayomer akeb David ubakir. I'm gonna just like whack David all the way into the
Pin him
wall.
into the wall.
Right. Vayisov David mipanav pamayim, and David eludes him twice. Now, if he throws it, it's hard to kind of play off that was unintentional and get a second whack at it, right?
Right.
So that's why I'm going to assume he's making some sort of stabbing motion, and David is just dancing around playing music and apparently doesn't notice this. So
Or he does, and he just is like, I haven't been dismissed yet. Ding, 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 you know,
Right.
and then he's dodging these spear attacks.
right, I can't picture that in any way that is not hilarious. So I have to assume
I mean,
because
it might
because
be.
why stick around after the first one and or the second one, like David doesn't make a mention of this, and Shaul, I think, sees what's going on over here. Vayira Shaul milifnei David, and now Shaul sees what happened and is scared of David. Why? I would assume because he sees that God is orchestrating this whole thing. God
Go
has
on, just read the pasuk. It tells you exactly why he's afraid.
Ki haya Adonai imo umeim Shaul sar, because God is with David and has left Shaul. But how does he know that God is with David? Answer is that
He's tried to kill him twice and he missed.
right, but that's what I'm saying. He didn't miss because David is very acrobatic and intentionally dodged the spear. He missed because David, in his just random dancing through the room, Shaul is whacking at him, and David is just playing his music, and it happens to be that David is oblivious and still manages to avoid being killed.
I don't like that reading.
Why?
Because if somebody has okay, you know what?
Imagine he has his back to him.
Okay,
He's playing the music. His back is to Shaul.
Why would
Shaul,
his back be to Shaul?
Who knows? Because there's other people in the crowd and he's playing music to them, or because he turned around. But my point is, if his back is to him, he has no idea what Shaul is doing. Shaul stabs, and at that exact moment, David turns this way. And Shaul stabs, and the other moment, he turns the other way. If I'm Shaul,
Okay.
I go, that's not a coincidence. One time is a coincidence. Two times is weird. And that's freaking
Right, but
me
like,
out.
wouldn't David like, even if let's say he's on stage and King Shaul has the throne on the stage, like, all the people are gonna be, you know.
To your way of reading before, if God is whispering in his ear, that's the guy, he's taken over for you. Why don't you try to kill him? Go ahead, try right now. He's not even looking at you. So Shaul stabs, and God goes, nope. Right?
Yeah.
That's going to drive you nuts.
Yeah.
Because then you know the little voice you're hearing in your head is legit.
Yeah.
There's something about this that it terrifies Shaul on top of the madness. Shaul Meimo. So Shaul says, that's it. Goodbye. Leave my presence. Lo Sar Aleph. And instead of now being at the head of the army, he's appointed him to a troop of 1,000. Again, this is not something I've seen from other commentaries, but I think there's some irony in here. The women came out and said Shaul is in charge of, or has slain 1,000. That's the smaller of the numbers. Now, David, you're in charge of the smaller of the numbers, right? He's demoting him.
Right, maybe that'll work. If I can't kill him directly, maybe I'll make him the...
Well, it's going to get even worse what he tries.
Right, well, he tries to do the Uriah gambit.
Yeah, we're going to get to that right now.
And that doesn't work.
To march ahead of the troops. But David is successful. Everything that he does, God is with him. And Shaul saw that it doesn't matter what he does to him, he continues to be successful, and as David continues to be successful, Shaul continues to be afraid of him. And now we have a little bit of a unification between Yisrael and Yehuda. Ohevet David. Everybody loves David. Because he's marching ahead of. He's doing what the king is supposed to do, right? The king was brought on to lead the army in battle,
unite the people,
and correct, and all of that. David is checking all the boxes. So Shaul does not like that.
And all this
right.
Stuff. He's given the Saturday morning drasha, maybe.
Yeah, everyone is throwing flowers at him, and Shaul will have none of it. Vayomer Shaul el David, hine biti hagdola merav ota eten lecha leisha. Chayeli leben chayo vilachem milchamot Adonai v'Shaul amar al tihi yadi bo utihi bo yad plishtim. Okay, here's where it gets super murky. So Shaul says to David, I want you to marry my daughter Merav. Why does Shaul say that?
It's super weird because he was already supposed to do this.
So that's the first point. Part of what David was promised for killing Goliath was
the
king's daughter, and what was the other promise? Fabulous prizes, wealth, right?
Yeah.
What he was told is whoever kills Goliath, the king will make him wealthy and give him his daughter. So Shaul says, come marry Merav, and I will give her to you as a wife. But it comes with conditions. You have to be a Ben Chayil and fight the wars of Hashem. And now Shaul again tells us, and it's something that a lot of the academics will point out to you over here, is we get an unusual amount of internal monologue. Normally in Tanach, we're not told people's inner thoughts. We're told their actions. And here we're told David's actions. We are not told David's inner thoughts, but we get we get like a peek into Shaul's mind. Shaul says, again, assuming internally, Alti Yadibo, I don't want to have to kill him. I'll have the Plishtim kill him. Now, it's not a great strategy. He seems to be super successful at killing Plishtim, right?
Right, he killed the biggest one.
Right, he killed the biggest one, and he's continued to kill them. He kills 10,000s of them. The women are singing about it. He continues to be successful even when he's demoted to only be the officer of 1,000. So maybe if you're the king,
right, find a better method.
Right, there are other ways to wipe somebody
up.
Yeah, we have them later on in Tanakh. Yes, so David, it seems, learns this from Shaul, right? Shaul kind of innovated the gambit of assassination, but David does it, I think a little bit better. But later on, we have with Achav and Izevel, there's plenty of ways for a king to take somebody out. This doesn't seem to be the most efficient one for sure, and you could have done it without Merav. But okay, Vayomer David el Shaul. So David responds. Again, if the king offers his daughter to you, what is the one and only answer?
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
No problem. In fact, that's part of the reason I killed Goliath. Vayomer David el Shaul, Mi anochi, mi chayai, mishpachat avi b'Yisrael ki yeh chatan lamelech. Who am I? Oh, I'm a nobody. I come from nobodies. My father's family. How could I possibly be the son-in-law of the king? Now, I have to assume that there is some validity to this, meaning he could have just said, "Who am I to marry into the family of the king?" Why is he bringing in his lineage?
Because there was still doubt about it?
Right. There's skeletons in his closet. He comes from Moab.
Right.
So if he doesn't want to marry Meirav, he's kind of got an out over here where he could be like, hey, look, remember the Moabite thing is, kind of questionable. Are you really sure that this is what you want to do? But if I'm David, I'm only doing that if I super definitely don't want to marry Meirav. I'm not doing that as a polite gesture, but then saying, and yes, I will certainly do it if you insist, right? This isn't a polite response. This is a decline, an intentional decline. And Shaul.
Maybe she wasn't as pretty as Michal. I don't know.
Okay. Well, who says he was going to be offered Michal?
Right.
Because she was the one who loved him.
Well, we're going to get to that. But
Meirav was the older one, right?
Meirav, we're going to assume, was the older one, yeah.
So let's hold on. So assuming she was pretty and there was nothing intrinsically wrong with her, why would he then decline?
Why would he? Yeah, why would he decline?
It's a political trap.
He doesn't want to. He has at least some sort of inkling that Shaul is not necessarily super happy with him.
Right. But that being said, creating a further right, if somebody's your enemy, do they really want to create a further entanglement by making you their son-in-law?
Well,
to me that seems like a strange move.
Yeah, it's super strange, especially how Shaul says the Plishtim are going to kill him. You have an opportunity here, Shaul. You know you're not going to have a dynasty.
Your daughter to be a widow.
Well, no, it works in the opposite.
Right.
You know you're not going to have a dynasty, right?
Right.
If you believe David is chosen, that means your grandson will sit on the throne.
Right. Why do you?
You will continue to have kings in your lineage.
Right.
Don't try to kill David. Let him marry Meirav and live happily ever after. And someday your grandson will be the next Jewish king.
Right.
Instead, he says, no, I want him to marry. I want to offer Meirav, but it'll never actually come to fruition because I'm going to send him out to battle and he won't make it back.
Right. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Vayhi ba'et tate et Meirav, and it was at the time that Meirav was given or should have been given. This is a little confusing in the language. Meirav bat Shaul David, vayhi nidna la'Adriel hamecholati leisha, and she was instead given to somebody else, Adriel. We don't know very much about this guy, Adriel. This is very weird for a number of reasons. The Gemara talks about. The Gemara looks at this whole thing as a very technical, halachic kedushin question, meaning David was promised a bunch of money, and Shaul says, well, that'll be part of the dowry. Okay, does that become a milveh, and then can you be mekadesh b'milveh? This whole thing is very weird. He's planning to give Meirav, and then at the time, he kind of switches it out and gives her to somebody else.
Is he trying to embarrass David?
Is he trying to embarrass David?
And he doesn't say anything about the battle afterwards. This is not like David goes out to battle. He's going to fight the wars of Hashem.
Did he do it?
Right. He wins. Okay, now it's time. Oh, but he already gave her away.
Right.
He immediately just like, all right, you go out and fight the wars. And like, I don't know. And all right.
Right.
That offer's off the table.
What other father-in-law do we have in Tanach who plays shenanigans with marrying off one of his two daughters? Yeah, Lavan. Let's keep reading and see if we can get some more Lavan out of this. I did see one commentary who says that, and I don't know how he reads this into the text, but this was Meirav's doing, meaning she went off and eloped with Adriel at the time that she was supposed to have been given over to David.
David just liked that guy.
Right, David. Yeah,
that was her high school sweetheart.
Right, she's the only one of Shaul's family who is not immediately in love with David the second they meet him.
Yeah.
Shaul loved him. Yehonatan loved him, and in a minute we're going to get to Michal, who also loves him. V'tehav Michal bat Shaul et David v'yagidu l'Shaul v'yishar hadavar beinav, and Michal, the daughter of David, the daughter of Shaul is in love with David, and it was told to Shaul, and this was good in his eyes. This is the one and only time in all of Tanakh, and everybody who teaches this parak says the exact same thing. This is the one and only time in Tanakh where we have a woman loving a man. Every other time that there is a couple that we talk about who are in love, in all of Tanakh, it is the man loving the woman. The one exception that proves the rule is Shir Hashirim, which is really less about individual people.
Yeah, but this is talking about political stations.
No, this is her. She loves him.
No, she is the princess. That's why she loves him.
Why doesn't Meirav love him?
Because she didn't want him, but she's the princess, and that's why.
You're saying this is not romantic love.
This is why is it that? Because you wouldn't say that a woman loves a man, because a woman loving a man is not appropriate.
Okay.
Nah, I don't know about
One
that.
second. Yeah.
It's not appropriate
Okay.
because the woman doesn't call the shots there.
Okay.
Okay, she's the princess.
Mm-hmm.
She calls the shot.
Interesting.
You're
her
saying
station.
because she's royal, she says, "Daddy, I want that one," but
Yes.
normally it's not. It
So
doesn't
that
work
that
like
goes
that.
in line with what we were saying.
Because this is not a, so to speak, a political marriage in so much as David is not of the lineage of a king. David is a shepherd.
Right.
So he is beneath her in political station.
Right. We
Like
said
you said before.
Right. We said before the more powerful party is the
Maybe.
one who expresses the love.
Right, and she's the more powerful
Right. So
party.
she says, "Daddy, get me that one." It's like, all right.
So what did
This could work.
why does she love him?
Well, he's the political. He's the
He's the
warrior.
hero.
He's the warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's a rock star right now. Girls, for some inexplicable
rock
reason.
star. Funny.
He is. He's a rock star.
Swing.
Yeah, but he's a rock star. I mean, imagine like,
Yeah.
you know, if Schwarzenegger were like, you know, like the head of Van Halen. I don't know.
Put it all together.
Right. Put it together. Like if there was a dude who was like the head of the army.
In pictures, wedding pictures, traditionally the man is on the right, the woman is on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the woman is of a higher political station. So
That's
the
interesting.
Queen's picture,
Mm-hmm.
when she married Philip, was flipped.
Interesting.
That is
I
interesting.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Vayomer Shaul etnena lo utihi lo lemokesh. This is not necessarily the best thing you want the father to say about his daughter. I'm going to give her to him, and she can be a snare for him, a mokesh, a stumbling block. Utihi bo yad plishtim, and then the plishtim will kill him. Vayomer Shaul David bishtayim titchatein bi hayom. Today, through one or the other, the second one, we're going to become in-laws.
You could have had both for all I care.
Right. There is an opinion.
Couldn't have both.
No, there's actually there's an opinion in the Gemara that deals with did he have kedushin with Meirav? Was he sort of engaged to both, which would be a halachic problem. But the straightforward reading is Meirav is out of the picture, and maybe even according to some commentaries, this happens after Meirav died, which is hard to understand because she has like 5 kids. But okay, the point is he now has the opportunity to marry daughter number 2. Vayitzav Shaul et avadav, and now remember before David and Shaul were talking mano a mano, right? Shaul says, "I want you to marry my daughter," and David responds, "Who am I?" Here we now suddenly have we have a go between.
Right.
Yitzav Shaul el avadav dabru el David. Speak to David balat privately. Lemor.
But command him. Dabru is the stronger Dabru.
Yeah, I think it's more convince him.
Right.
Lemor hinei chafetz b'cha hamelach v'chol avadav vehevucha v'atayit chatem b'melach. Like, this is in your best interest, David. The king likes you. Everybody likes you. Why wouldn't you want to join the family? Meaning, there's an assumption that maybe David's going to turn this one down too. V'yidabru avdei Shaul ba'aznei David et hadavarim ha'ela, and they do as commanded. Vayomer David. Hanikale be'einechem hitchatein b'melach v'anochi ish rash v'nikla. You think it's so easy to just become the son-in-law of the king? That's not a small thing. I am a poor person. I am of no consequence. I'm not the kind of person who should be the son-in-law of the king. There is a lot of subtext here. Hold on to the phrase ish rash. That's going to be very important for us when we get to Shmuel Bet and the story of David and Bathsheba. But what David is maybe hinting at over here...
Poor shepherd.
Well,
that Natan and Navi talks about.
Yes, correct. But one of the things that David could be pointing out over here is, I'm not supposed to be poor. I was guaranteed a whole bunch of money, right? But what was me, the poor shepherd? Isn't it weird that I'm still a poor shepherd?
Right.
Like, I'm supposed to get the daughter, I'm supposed to get money, and apparently neither of those things are happening.
Right,
so before I take the daughter, I would like the grand prize that I was promised.
Forget about the girl. Just give me the cash.
Right.
That seems a little callous, no?
He doesn't do it. That's what I'm saying. You have to. He does it in a very discreet manner. Vanochi ish rash v'nikla. Um, the the question we would have to address is why? How can Shaul do this? He promised the daughter. He promised the money. He's not delivering on any of those, and now he
Right,
kind
are
of
people
back.
going to start to talk?
Right. Well, even la halacha.
Right.
Right? You promise those things, make good on your promise, and finish. So I think the best answer to that is Shaul promised none of those things. The men that David talked to on
Right.
the
He's
on the
totally
war
gonna
line.
give you. I mean, could it be sarcasm, dude? If you kill
No,
this
he
Goliath,
asked multiple people. He asks over and over again, like, tell me again what's going to happen. Tell me again. So it's very possible that there was a rumor spreading through the troops that, oh, anybody that does this, fabulous prizes await you. You'll even get the daughter of the king.
Right,
but Shaul makes no mention of that. So it's not necessarily so that Shaul actually owes these things. V'yagidu avdei Shaul lo leimor kadavarim ha'ila diber David, and David sort of blew us off. And now again, David's not speaking to Shaul. Shaul's not speaking to David. There's intermediaries over here. V'yomer Shaul kol tamru David ein chayfetz lamelech b'mohar. Don't worry about like a mohar is the gift, that like the bride price, right? The you're gonna pay for marrying my daughter. I don't even want any money. You know what I want? Foreskins. Ki b'mea arelot plishtim lihina came ba'oivei hamelech. All you have to do is bring me 100 foreskins of the plishtim, of the enemies of the king. V'Shaul chashav lahapil et David bi'ad plishtim. And Shaul has like double, triple down on this idea that the plishtim are going to get him. That's the only way I can knock this guy out, is if I have him go after the plishtim, then they're in big trouble. Now this takes us so there's a bunch of things that are going on over here. One is, as we mentioned, there seems to be shades of Lavan in how Shaul is addressing all of this, and how he's being sort of shady with the marrying of the daughters, especially if we go with the reading that they were in fact a daughter was promised to David. Second of all, what is this? Like, what kind of request is this? It's one thing to say, I want you to kill 100 plishtim. I want you to
bring the evidence.
Right. What is that about?
Why do you need to bring the evidence? I don't know.
Right, and
well, so I remember hearing about this. Like, it's not just like this is supposed to increase the danger. That's what I think.
Why? Why?
Because look, if you kill 100 people, killing 100 people is one thing. Okay, stabbing them, letting them rot, and then running away, it's not so tough. But if you kill 100 of them, who's to say there's not 150 of them around the corner? Like, if you have to stop and undress them and chop off the foreskin and then put it in your sack and then go to the next, you're going to be tarrying around in the Philistine camp for a long time, and like everybody's gonna be like, what the hell are you doing? They're gonna converge on him to kill him.
Right. You're saying logistically the only way this works is if you massacre them and have the time
to go around afterwards. Like if you do it one at a time, or even if you kill a group of them, like eventually they're gonna they're gonna hit the alarm bell, and it's just like, red alert, David intruder,
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is gruesome for a number of reasons.
When have we ever
mutilating the dead?
To mutilate,
right? So
to speak, you got Shmuel.
So that's a great reference, right? We told Shimon and Levi told Shechem that they have to circumcise themselves, right? And that opened them up to being massacred. Here it's sort of massacre them first and then bring back the evidence. But I do think there's a reference to Shechem. I also see a reference, sort of, unfortunately, but an inverted reference to Amalek. It says that Amalek was Vayizanebecha kol hanechashalim acharecha, that they attacked the stragglers and they were Vayizanev. So Rashi mentions that they cut off the Brit Milah and said, God, this is so important to you, right? So there's something sinister about this request that Shaul is making, and I think the reference to Lavan is to sort of prepare you, the reader, for how sinister this is going to get. It's important to note that the Plishtim are always, and only the Plishtim are referred to as the Arelim. When David went to battle Goliath, he said, who is this Arel? Right? The Plishtim historically are the only ones who don't circumcise because they're not native to Canaan.
They don't come from Canaan, right?
Right. So the Moab, Ammon, like even Egypt, they all practice circumcision. The only ones that don't are the Plishtim, at least until later they eventually start like to integrate into society. But the Plishtim, the defining characteristic of their difference is that they don't circumcise themselves, and so that's what Shaul is kind of calling out over here to continue the Gemara's halachic conversation. This is now the how David is being makadesh with these foreskins. So the question is, if you are
they worth a shepherd fruit?
right. So the Gemara talks
joke.
about the Gemara talks about
On
the
you
makadesh.
or on me?
If you makadesh with b'milva ubepruta, is the das of the woman on the milva or on the pruta? And then the Gemara says, well, these foreskins are not even worth a pruta. Yes, they are, because you can feed them to your animals.
Oh,
that's the Gemara.
I thought Robin Williams said,
Yeah.
Royal,
Yes.
You know the joke.
Yes.
No.
I'll tell you later.
Okay. V'yagidu avadav l'David es advarim ha'ela, and David. So the servants come back and they're like, okay, here's what you got to do. Not only do you have to kill 100 Plishtim, we want physical evidence of their demise. Vayishar davar b'einei David, and David says, perfect. This is a great idea. Lidchatem b'melech v'lo malu hayamim. Before the time had expired, I think there is a pun reference over here. V'lo malu hayamim is a reference to milah, right? It's the same shorish over there. Vayakam David vayelech huvan ashav vayachba plishtim matayimish. So he goes and kills 200 people. This is again double, right? We had by Lavan that Yaakov works for 14 years for Rachel. So over here, David also doubles up the price.
Me? I'm onto your game. Like, is this like an implied threat?
Yeah. Vayave David es arlo sehem v'mal'um lamelech. So again, you have the same mila shorish over here, and he brings the foreskins, and they were counted out. But again, as a pun on the mila, lamelech l'hitchatein b'melech, v'yitain lo Shaul et Michal bito lisha, and so Shaul dutifully gives Michal as the daughter, as his wife in marriage to David. Vayar Shaul v'yeda ki Adonai im David u'Michal bat Shaul ahevasu. And Shaul realizes that's it. There's nothing to do to this guy. God is with him in every possible way, and Michal loves him. Everybody loves this guy. Vayosef Shaul laro mipnei David od vayhi Shaul oyev et David kol yamim, and Shaul continued to get more and more afraid of him and saw himself as David's enemy all the days. Vayitzu sarei plishtim vayhi midei tzeisos sachal David mikol avdei Shaul vayikar shmo meod. The Plishti chiefs marched out to battle, and every time they marched out, David was more successful than all the other officers, and his reputation soared. Good?
Yeah, this is pretty banana.
Well, this is the end. Beautiful friend. I hope you enjoyed and would love to hear your thoughts and responses. You can message me on Twitter/X @Isaacson. Please consider sharing this shiur with others who might enjoy it. See you next time.